It's me, Tyler of Knowledge Hub, assembling yet another video about zeitgeists of the decades. A zeitgeist is basically just the culture, the motif, the aura. The 60s were this, the 80s were that. Now, I'm sure most of you watching probably were kids during this time frame, so it's probably pretty nostalgic. I grew up here, and it's pretty nostalgic for me as well. But I do want to try my best to ignore my personal tastes and preferences to give some semblance of objectivity, or the illusion of it. The 2000s were a decade that were highly anticipated. The name itself evoked such emotion. It was the future, the 21st century, Schizoid Man. That new millennium was finally upon us, and all of this had a huge impact on how it was perceived. Add in a new take on futurism, which became mainstream, marketable, and cool. This was, as I believe Rebel Taxi once called it, the Y2K era, which was incredibly prominent with marketing and generalized culture that fit this theming. All of this was only bolstered by outside non-pop culture events, though. Of course, Y2K is mostly associated with the computer bug scare of all non-Y2K compliant computers. The lights could go out, the banks explode. But this didn't end up actually happening because a lot of smart people made sure it didn't. Nonetheless, it showed that technology and computing could both help and hurt humanity. And this all combined with the massive interest in upcoming websites and internet services. It could make you a millionaire and end the world. And this gave technology an almost mythical quality to the mass public. But of course, we saw the dot-com bubble burst, and the limitless potential of the internet, the overwhelming hype, was taken down a couple notches. But it was really another event of the early 2000s that really shifted the decade's perception. You know what I mean. Uncertain times, global conflict, it all overshadowed the previous hype of a new millennium. As for the geopolitics and the political views of this era, the ebb and flows of Strauss-Howe generational theory, I feel it's better to leave all that for another video. Now, I maintain without 9/11, the entire decade zeitgeist would probably be of the Y2K variety, but instead, the tone of media shifted. So what did we end up getting? See, the 2000s finds itself in a very strange place in history, one where the mass public's perception of the digital landscape goes from somewhat niche to absolutely essential in a very short time frame. This went along with technology on all fronts going through massive changes. It seemed like everything was in a perpetual cycle of obsolescence. Things would become outdated quicker than they could get out of store shelves. But in hindsight, yeah, the worst of that really came during this decade. The flip phone, the BlackBerry, the Nokia bricks, they were all replaced by these sexy slabs of glass and touch interface. The bulky tube televisions with the low resolutions and fuzzy pictures replaced with high definition flat screens and the plasmas, and physical media would change every few years. The VHS, the DVD, the HD DVD, the HD DVD Blu-ray extension add-on for your Xbox 360. Video rental services boomed before they didn't. Cable television flourished until it didn't. Internet speeds went from dial-up to actually usable. Video game graphics reached a point where humans kind of look like humans, but they still don't, so it's disgusting. Online gaming opened up for the masses. 2D hand-drawn cell animation was replaced as 3D CGI became the norm. See, many of these things are products of the 2000s, and even if they started earlier, mass adoption happened here. It's exciting, but untested. But yes, there is more to life than technology, even if it was a very big part of the 2000s. General media was also at a crossroads. Now, what is cool of a decade is always not cool in hindsight, and particularly music videos and general entertainers show this off best. It seems like the vibe they went for was flagrantly gaudy, exorbitant amounts of money, flaunting it, flashy, showy, all over the top. I'm fucking awesome. Look at me, everybody. I'm cool. Now, all this seemed to last up until the global financial crisis near the end of the decade. Showing off your mansion in a music video while the viewer is worried about their home foreclosing might be in bad taste after all. And this is where I want to take a quick aside to address something I said in an earlier video, this one. I was wrong. The whole era of the gaudy and flashy mindset and how it came to an end seems to flow perfectly into the early 2010s notions of hipsters being cool not to be cool, or ironically cool or some shit. The general indie land landscape that would grow, the folksy and the artistic. And the reason I didn't think about this before is because all zeitgeists are not based solely on what actually happened, the reality of the decade. It's hyperbole. It's summing up an entire span of 10 years with a simple idea. The 2000s were, as a whole, pretty hard to nail down, just like the 90s were. There's a vast disparity from the start to the end, but primarily the consistent theme would be over the top. LEDs, curved edges, technology that thought it was better than it was. Subtlety did not exist, and even minimalistic designs had to conform with some sense of cool in the future, fucking George Jetson. It parallels the 80s pretty well in the sense of over the top, and seems to ebb and flow with every other decade more or less being outlandish. Nostalgia works on 20-year cycles. Now we have countless 2000s properties and products being brought back, because there's demand. If I had to nail down what I feel is most symbolic of the 2000s to me, though, it would be this. A fancy-ass Mac running 2004 PowerPoint and these disgusting gradients. It's flashy and gaudy and thinks it's way better than it actually is. But I love it all the same. This is Tyler of Knowledge Hub.